So I want to have a conversation. I'm not going to say quick because every time I say quick, it turns out to be very long. I consider myself ballroom adjacent, so I'm not an active participant in the ballroom scene. I dibbled my toe in the mainstream ballroom scene. Didn't work out for me, but I was more so in the Kiki scene from like 2010 to 2015 in the house of Unbothered Cartier. But not here to talk about my personal ballroom history, but I there's been a conversation regarding sexual assault, and as somebody who's an outsider, I have just been observing and taking everything in. And it seems to me like there needs to be a conversation about rape culture, because I'm seeing a lot of victim blaming. I'm seeing a lot of coddling of people who have engaged in harm. And I'm seeing a lot of people talking about how they feel inconvenienced by having to grapple with somebody being sexually assaulted, publicly talking about being sexually assaulted, and having that story cloud their victory. So let's just make this really quick. See, I said it again. So, rape culture is a term coined in the 1970s designed to show the ways in which society blames victims of sexual assault and normalizes male sexual violence. It allows us to live in a society where it is acceptable to teach sexualized violence prevention as don't get raped instead of don't rape. Also, we need to talk about, because I've been seeing conversations about, well, if the person got sexually assaulted, why didn't why didn't they go to police and do a report? Why are they trying to bring it to ballroom, which I think is very stupid to say. But let's just I'll connect the dots later, but let's just get here. The criminal justice system almost never brings perpetrators of sexual violence and abuse to justice. Society so often makes excuses for perpetrators or finds a reason why victims and survivors ask for what happened to them or somehow deserved it. People so often don't believe victims and survivors, whether that's family and friends, the police, jurors, or people reading about cases in the news. Also, there's not enough funding to support victims and survivors, whether that's through counseling, advocacy, emotional support, or financial and other practical help. So, this right here, ladies and gentlemen, is the rape culture pyramid. And it shows how it shows how the actual act of rape and or sexual assault is at the top of the pyramid, but how all of these other behaviors underneath the actual act itself of the sexual assault, sexual violence, rape, actually undergirds and supports the normalization of the actual act of sexual assault. A lot of things that I have seen people post in the past couple of days regarding the incident, and I'm not going to use anybody's names or I'm not going to use any house's name, so you don't have to worry about that. But we do need to talk about this. So what I have seen in the past couple of days are some of these things that are reflected on this pyramid. I've seen victim blaming and shaming, calling the child a hoe because the accused sexual assaulter and the victim had consensual sexual relations before, and he's just a hoe. Coercion, manipulation, threats, revenge porn, non consensual photos or videos, flashing and exposing, catcalling, unwanted non sexual touch, stalking, locker room banter. These are the things that create the normalized environment of the sexual assault that makes it hard so that when somebody is actually sexually assaulted, uh, they have to have this internal battle as to whether they're even going to tell the story, because then the microscope will then be put on them instead of placed on the person who is accused of engaging in the actual acts. So I hope some folks in ballroom are able to um really sit with how they played a part in amplifying rape culture. I One post is coming to mind where somebody said, "Why couldn't they just wait? Our house just won house with the most points. Why couldn't they just wait?" I believe the language of being inconvenienced by somebody by somebody telling their story and what they went through. I think that's part of a rape culture because it seeks to silence the victim, because the victim then now has to consider how their truth will impact you and your ability to celebrate and be victorious. Just from what I've seen, people refusing to even entertain. I think that this is where I'm going to end here. People are saying, "What does this have to do with ballroom?" Because this alleged incident didn't happen during a ball. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. It didn't happen in the confines of a ball. So why is this even being brought to ballroom? Well, one, as great as Ballroom is, Ballroom has a very well documented. It's been swept under the rug, but now, particularly with everybody having podcasts and everybody reliving stories, we are hearing more and more stories, particularly of sexual assault. And let's keep it real, of pedophilia, of people purposely pursuing underage people in the ballroom scene and grooming them for sex and abusive relationships. So we have to talk about that. And um, sexual assault and rape is all about power and control. And that's kind of what the ballroom scene is about. You have somebody who had a father position that's associated with a very powerful, influential, iconic, legendary house that also has their own figureheads. Ballroom is a very male dominated. So you just can't separate and not really engage with the intersections of how the scene that's male dominated with these very male dominated structures, how when this situation came up, looking back at how they used their power and influence to kind of keep things under wraps until the victim exposed it. And then even when the victim exposed the situation, there wasn't a what from what I could see, there wasn't a conversation where um care was created for the victim. It was, how can we kind of delay this until we have to address it? And if the allegations are true, you have somebody that harms people in ballroom, and the whole point of people being vocal, the whole point of victims reclaiming their narrative and telling their story, is very likely that somebody, and then it's so dumb. You want a queer person, and I don't know if the person is documented or undocumented, but you want a queer person in Florida to go to the police in fucking Florida and report that he, as a man, got sexually assaulted and drugged by another man. Like what? Like let's use some common sense and let's bring in some context. But the whole point of telling the story, it is hard to prove sexual assault in a criminal case. Hard as hell. It's hard as hell. And the type of justice that we think we want, or the type of justice that we want to get, we might not ever get that in a court case. But I applaud the person who spoke out about their experience, because the goal is to prevent harm. Because if this person did it to that person, it's likely that they did it to somebody else. And the goal is to prevent harm. And because these are all ballroom people, and because this is something that perpetually happens in ballroom, it's very likely that it's likely to happen again, either at this person's hands or somebody else that's engaging in this activity. So I really need people to be mindful of how we all are perpetuating rape culture, and just be mindful of the things that we say and the things that we put out on social media. And sometimes putting out something ignorant and then putting up an apology